So let's start out like we normally do, short period of bell meditation. Wherever you are behind your avatar, please get into a nice meditation posture. And as I ring the Ching bell, the idea, focus on the sound of the bell. We want to get our deep listening going. We want to get that concentration going so we can all absorb some Dharma today. You're going to get distracted. When it happens, just gently remind yourself and go back to focusing on the sound of the bell. Then there'll be a short pause after the short meditation. Then I'll do the 3 recitations, and then we'll talk. So, give you a moment, get into a nice posture, and we'll begin at the sound of the bell. I go for refuge to the Buddha, the teacher. I go for refuge to the Dharma, the teaching. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the taught. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I have taken refuge in the Buddha. I have taken refuge in the Dharma. I have taken refuge in the Sangha. 3 pure precepts. Cease to do harm. Do only good. Do good for others. Bodhisattva vow. However innumerable all beings are, I vow to lead them all. However inexhaustible my delusions are, I vow to extinguish them all. However immeasurable the Dharma teachings are, I vow to master them all. However endless the Buddha's way is, I vow to follow it completely. Swaha. So here we are, Buddha Center, Temple, Friday. Yay. I know last week I said I was going to do something on defilements or hindrances, but it just seemed too negative today. So I want to do something a little more positive today. What I want to talk about today is basically answering a question you'll need to answer for yourself. What do you think is the primary goal of practicing Buddhism, of walking the Noble Path? You don't have to answer out loud or type it out or anything. Just think about it. Because there are some very common ones, but there are some ones that kind of will even take me by surprise after all this time of why people think that what the primary goal is of practicing Buddhism. And sure, the first ideal that's likely to come to mind for a lot of people is nirvana. You know, this amazing place you're supposed to be able to reach. Because people want to be removed from what they hear about the cycle of birth to death. Hello, Holly. The cycle of birth to death. But is this really the path that the awakened one was laying out for the majority of human beings? Or was there a loftier and maybe what could even be seen as a more important goal than that of reaching nirvana? Now, I want you to know from the beginning, I'm using nirvana as a placeholder for a lot of other things that can distract us from what I'm going to talk about today. Meditation, people can get too focused on meditation. They can get too focused on a lot of different aspects of Buddhist practice and kind of forget the rest. So Siddhartha, like to talk about Siddhartha. Siddhartha was a human being, and just like you and me and everybody else, he had human being issues. So he awakened to the realities of the Four Ennobling Truths as a human being, right? He did that as a human being. And when he was the Buddha, you know, people called him the Buddha or the Awakened One or the Tathagata, he was still a human. And he taught those realities. He taught the realities necessary to be a human being. And as a human being, he lived those realities, and those realities were all about the human condition. All humans suffer. A cause of suffering is unnatural craving and attachment, and that particularly goes for permanence. People have this craving and attachment to permanence. And there's a way out of suffering. And that way is eightfold. So Siddhartha's focus was on the plight and liberation of human beings. Doesn't this point, though, to a particular intent in all of the Buddha's teachings? If we look at all the texts and the sutras and all that, could it really boil down to this? How to be a better human being. Doesn't matter whether you're a monk or a layperson. The Buddha's teachings, when we look at them, they point to, come on, put in the effort, make the commitment, do the work, be a better human being. In my worldview and in my experience, I think the answer is a loud and joyous yes. That Siddhartha, the Buddha, wanted us to be better human beings. When the recognition arises, for example, that you are not the only one who suffers, and that this suffering is an encompassing human condition, well, then you can't help but develop empathy for the suffering of others as well as your own suffering. You know, you start to look deeply at yourself, right? At your own cravings and attachments. You look at your own habitual reactivities, both the wholesome and the unwholesome. And you start to learn ways to lessen the hold of the unwholesome things and strengthen the hold of the wholesome habitual reactivities, the habits and dispositions that you might have. So you discover that there is this eightfold path away from suffering. And so you start to apply the lessons of appropriate view and intent and speech and action and livelihood and effort and mindfulness and concentration. Your mindfulness and your awareness, they grow. They broaden. They begin to encompass more than just yourself. And isn't this a way to cultivate a better human being? Developing empathy for others. Discovering your own strengths and weaknesses. taking the effort or making the effort, making the effort to apply the lessons of the Eightfold Path, growing your mindfulness and your awareness. This is cultivating a better human being. And it's all Buddhist practice. Karma, compassion, and generosity of spirit. These are three aspects of Buddhist philosophy and practice that should be at the top of the to-do list for any practitioner. These are meant to be the key considerations of a bodhisattva in training. Karma allows learning about the self. Compassion requires that we learn about others. And generosity of spirit involves helping others without any expectation of reward of any sort. This is a path to cultivating a better human being, each one of these. So you learn about karma. You learn that every action you take has consequences. You learn that that's really what karma means. It just means action. And every action that every single human being takes has consequences. Period. So you recognize that you can't control the actions of others, though you've probably tried. We all have in our lives, right? But you do find out that you can't control the actions of others. But you can, and you discover that you must control your own actions. Taking an honest look at your past and at your present moment, you assess actions taken with the intent of uncovering your good and your bad choices. Then you take a deeper look and you begin to reveal some of the consequences of those actions, wholesome and unwholesome. And granted, most of the consequences are going to be unknown to you. You won't be able to track them all down. But the ones you can see are going to prove the existence of karma, of this idea of human physics in action. You will come to find, and you'll come to realize and accept, hopefully, that your bad choices led you directly to bad results. And I'm going to have to say here, most of the time. Because, hey, there are times when we make bad choices and we win the lottery or something, right? We make a bad choice, but we get good results. We think, oh, well, that was good. But let's keep in mind, that bad choice that you got good results from, somebody else got bad ones. So good choices, they usually resulted in good results, right? Good consequences. But again, not every time. But enough times that you know it's better to do good than do bad. So you don't live in the past, right? But you learn from the past. And with this realization, you begin to strive to do your best for yourself and others. And isn't this cultivating a better human being? Karma is a path to cultivating a better human being. The understanding of it and the action required of it. And then there's one that you hear me say all the time. These 5 words? Compassion, or no, I guess 6. Compassion is non-negotiable for a Buddhist. Non-negotiable. It's not one of these things where you can say, well, I'm a Buddhist, but I'm not a very compassionate person. Or I don't practice compassion. Or I don't think about compassion. Can't be a Buddhist without it. It's the first of the 4 ennobling truths that teaches us that suffering is a fact of human existence. And that deep look at karmic consequences that you've already taken reveals the different depths of suffering that the first truth points to. That suffering is something that all human beings have in common. Every human being is deserving of compassion because we are all connected through the truth of suffering. You know that saying, your suffering is my suffering? That's kind of the idea of empathy, especially as in our Buddhist practice. And once compassion is realized, then we begin to feel and experience the falling away of those unwholesome dispositions like anger and hatred and intolerance and envy and fear, right? They fall away, or they start to. They don't maybe fall all the way away, but they get a lot less hold on you. And once compassion is realized, isn't this cultivating a better human being? And the other disposition that arises is generosity of spirit. It arises from compassion. We begin to say, ooh, I have empathy for this person or those people, and I want to help them. So that spurs your generosity of spirit. And you can't realize the encompassing nature of suffering. You can't experience the arising of compassion and not see the need to take intentional action to alleviate it. Generosity of spirit is that action. You take the path and you freely offer your skills and your time and your gifts to all beings. And you offer these without any expectation of reward or recognition. You do it because it just needs to be done. See a need, do it. And whether you volunteer to teach unwed mothers to care for their infants or even to care for themselves, or you make contributions of material goods to charitable organizations, you are practicing generosity of spirit. And isn't this another way of cultivating a better human being? So I want to stop here for a moment for a little practice idea. And I want to tell you, this is a practice idea that I do. And it has to do with generosity of spirit. And it has to do with this idea of you do it because it needs to be done. I want you to think about this. How many times have you thought, I need to do this, and then went, yeah, I'm going to go do something else instead? You do it because it needs to be done. So for me, it may be something as simple as there's a couple of dishes left, dirty dishes down in the sink, and I think, I don't really need to do those tonight, but I know they need to be done, so I just go down and do them. Right? So even the smallest chore around the house, if you think about it, think, oh, this is something that needs to be done, then just go do it. That is also generosity of spirit, both for yourself, maybe for your partner, and certainly for the place that you live. So do it because it needs to be done. Now, the second of the four ennobling truths is that the major cause of suffering is unnatural craving and attachment. And again, this is particularly for permanence, right? Don't like change. Well, nirvana, in the traditional sense, seems like a state of permanence. You get released from the cycle of birth and death, and you get to inhabit what I can only think of as a Buddhist sort of heaven. But if the major cause of suffering is a craving for permanence, and nothing is permanent, then isn't the goal of nirvana, or couldn't the goal of nirvana be a cause of suffering? So Buddhists are farmers, they're not hunters. We shouldn't be out there trying to hunt down nirvana, sitting in our nirvana stand in the woods, hoping that one will, walk by below us. And we don't want to be trying to hunt down enlightenment, for that matter. The positive thoughts and actions we take must not be with the intent that, hey, if I do this, and it's a good thing, then I'm going to reach nirvana. If or when nirvana is reached, it won't be because it was hunted down through thought or action. It will seem sudden when it happens, or if it happens. But actually, it gradually arose as a result of effort and commitment that you put into it over time. Nirvana cannot be reached with selfish intent. And you may ask, well, why not? Well, that's because if the intent of good thoughts and actions becomes predicated on reaching nirvana, then the intent is a selfish one, and selfishness is a hindrance in a Buddhist practice. Ergo, it's a hindrance in reaching nirvana. So there is a goal for Buddhist practitioners that is much more important than reaching nirvana, and much more likely to happen. And that goal can be reached in this very next moment. Realizing the Dharma that we call karma, and the Dharma that we call compassion, and the Dharma that we call generosity of spirit, all of these things, when we realize them, will cause the arising of a better human being. So in the next moment, make the effort and commit yourself to being a better human being. And I do not mean be better than the person next to you, that Jake needs to be better than Olivia or Maggie needs to be better than Quinn. You want to be a better human being than you were in the previous moment. So you cultivate that better human being. You cultivate that Buddha element that we each have.